Hey everyone. In today's session, we're going to be simplifying advanced approvals in Revenue Cloud. A lot of the teams either overcomplicate approvals or underestimate them. My goal is to show you how to design them cleanly, scalably, and in a way that actually supports revenue, not slows it down. For an agenda for today, I'm going to start with a little bit of introductions and then dig deeper into foundations, design patterns, considerations, and then dig into an org deep dive in a real world use case. Whether you're an architect, an admin, or a developer, this session will give you a practical understanding of how approvals really work under the hood. A little bit about me. My name is Khaled El Halabieh. I'm a principal technical architect here at Stratus Carta. I've spent most of my career in the Salesforce ecosystem, especially focused on Revenue Cloud. My passion is solving complex Revenue Cloud problems, and obviously approvals is one of them. And I think it's one of the misunderstood pieces. So hopefully today we can demystify approvals together. A little bit about Stratus Carta. We focus deeply on Revenue Cloud complexities, especially the architecture layer most teams don't anticipate. We work hands-on with some of the most complex orgs globally, which is why we've seen what works and what breaks in Revenue Cloud. Before we deep dive into approvals, I just wanted to say that approvals are not necessarily about control, but about confidence. Confidence that your pricing rules are respected, compliance is met, and revenue decisions are traceable. The mistake is obviously designing approvals as a gate. The right way is designing them as a scalable decision framework. Before we even build approvals, it's important for us to understand the roles and responsibilities and who's involved throughout the whole end-to-end cycle within approvals. This is where approvals typically fail, is when responsibilities are blurred. So you have four main personas that should be involved within your approvals. You have your approval admin, who oversees and governs all of the approvals that are happening. You have your designer who's responsible on building your approvals, the reviewer who's reviewing all the approval submissions that are happening, and the submitter are the personas who are submitting for approval. So once you've cleanly defined those personas, the system becomes more predictable overall. Within Advanced Approvals on Core as well, you have the Approvals app, which is more of a control center. As you've seen with other Revenue Cloud capabilities for product catalog management and pricing, we also have an approvals app that helps manage the approval flows, the submissions, the work items, and all of that. You also have an approval settings within the org to define org-wide settings for approvals as well. Now, I just wanted to take a moment before we actually start talking about design for your flows for approvals. So just wanted to highlight the main objects, not all of them, but just wanted to show you that within the data model for approvals, you have kind of two sides. You have the orchestration run, which is all the runs for your flows and all the stages and the steps that you're having and what is being executed within your flow, since Advanced Approvals on Core is based on flows. In parallel, you'll also see your submission, which is your request that once a persona or a submitter submits a quote, for example, the submission would have multiple work items, and each work item would be assigned to a specific user, group, or queue. So you have your submission, your work items under it, and then you'll have your orchestration runs and stages. We're going to see all of those once we get into the org, but just wanted to give a high-level understanding of kind of what are the main objects within the data model for approvals. As I mentioned earlier, the Advanced Approvals on Core are based on flows. So you have two types of flows for approvals. You have the auto launch flow, which is typically triggered via a button, and there's documentation on the Salesforce documentation, how to create the visual force page and the button and how to trigger your flows. I'll attach the links to the video as well. The other type of record triggered flow is via other type of approvals is through record triggered flows. Obviously, this is triggered via a record update. And then when you're designing your approvals, it's going to be kind of a stage and steps. This is how the flow structure is going to be, and we're going to see it in details. But just wanted to highlight that if you want sequential approvals, you look at multiple stages. And if you want parallel approvals, you look at within the same stage, multiple steps within it. And then if you want a mix of both, you use the mix between stages and steps as well. There are some considerations when designing to choose which one is better for you. We'll talk a little bit about considerations on other capabilities as well. So let's dive deeper into it. Within the advanced approvals, we also have the lightning components, which help us during runtime. So the approval trace lightning component that can be put on the lightning record page. The approval trace is used to see all your work items, who they're assigned to, when did they approve, their statuses, all of everything related to your work items and what's happening for your approval. You're going to be able to see it through the approval trace. The approval workflow is where you trigger your preview approval capability. And then in the orchestration work guide, this is where the approver can be able to approve, reject, or add a comment. And again, we're going to see all of those lightning components, but just wanted to give a brief within the guide on approvals. Some considerations, and I'm not going to go through all of this slide, but just wanted to highlight the main ones, is that when designing for choosing which type of flows, preview approvals only work with auto launch flow, not record triggered flows. And then for parallel approvals, if you want to leverage the lock action, you can't use it within your flow, but you'll have to create a subflow that locks your actual record as a flow action, rather than using the lock capability within the approval process. Also, approval chain name is very important when designing for your preview approvals, because that's what's being used to group whatever approvals are being submitted together. Within advanced approvals, you also have invocable actions. As of the Spring 26 release, the invocable actions can only be available in screen flows or Apex. So any other type of flows, you won't be able to use those actions. Some of the actions that you get are cancellation of a submission. So once you do a request and you want to either recall it or cancel it, you can also reassign approval work item. So if you want to delegate it to somebody else as an approver, or have some kind of action or automation to do that, you'll be able to do it through your invocable actions. Within preview approvals, so we're going to dig deeper into some of the capabilities within approvals. Preview approvals, as I mentioned earlier, only work with auto launch flow. There are some considerations that you need to be aware of when designing it. So for preview approvals, all the entry and exit criteria for the step needs to be marked as complete, or else you'll see an internal error message that shows up when you're trying to run your preview approvals. So you need to be aware of all the steps and all the stages that are happening within your approval and when designing them. Also, if you have any asynchronous job as a background step, you're going to see an asynchronous error message when trying to preview your approvals. Some of the considerations that you need to take, that these actions can be the update, delete, or insert. So if you have any type of background steps that's doing an update or delete or insert, this error is going to pop up when you're trying to preview your approvals. Now, within the other capability about smart approvals, some of the considerations that you need to be aware of are, for smart approvals to work, your conditions should only live within the step as well. So any conditions that you're using within the decision while designing the flow are not going to be or cannot be leveraged with smart approvals. Anything that smart approval needs to leverage should live within the approval step. Only numeric or text conditions work with smart approvals, so any other data type is not going to work. Using the not operator also doesn't work with smart approvals as of today. And then the smart approvals will only be considered if the prior approval submission status is either recalled or rejected. So if you have any other status for the approval submission and you're trying to resubmit for again, the smart approval is not gonna work. So just talking about those two main capabilities within approvals for preview and smart approvals, and now it's ready to dig deeper into a use case. I just created a simple example where you have a discount decision matrix where if you give a 5 to 10%, you are sending the approval for a sales ops. A little bit more for approval, you send it for sales ops, then a manager, and then for more than 15%, you send it for sales ops, then a manager, and then the finance as well. So let's dig deeper into the org and see everything that we've talked about. So within our approval, so I just created a quote that has a couple of line items, and I've added a 40% discount in order to trigger all the sequence that I had for sales ops, manager, and then finance. A little bit about the approval homepage. You'll be able to see your pending approval submissions, flow approval, work items, submissions, and then the configuring any of your approval alerts. If we go to the flow approval, we're going to be able to see all the flows, all the approval flows, and then I can go and be able to go to the flow that I've created for this example. What you can also do within the homepage of your approvals is use this widget over here or button to create your flow approval process. If you're a designer, it'll ask you can use a wizard or start from scratch. These two approvals, once you create them, are going to be an auto-launched flow. And then with the wizard, which is, I think, a cool feature where you can choose how many levels that you want, if there's any final action that you want within your flow, and if there's any recall path that you want to create. And it creates your structure, and then you just need to add your conditions and your assigned approvers within your flow. I already created for our use case a flow, so I've created an auto-launch flow. The first stage that we have is the get quote record, to get from the ID or the record ID that we have within approvals to get the whole record. And then I've created a decision component. And then within the decision, I'm looking at which level am I triggering for my approvals. And then I've created an approval stage. And then within each stage, we have a step that we're assigning the approvals towards. Within your stage, so first, whenever you're trying to design for approvals, you need to have a stage, and then you'll have steps within those stage. we have here, when you're trying to create an approval step, you can add your conditions here, and then add whatever conditions that you want. This is an out-of-the-box approval action. So this actually submits or tells you that this step is a submission for approval. And then your approval assignee can either be a user, a group, or a queue, or a resource within your flow, which could be a formula if you want to decide based on a specific metric or data point or region, and define different groups for every region. You need to pass in the record ID for your approval. This is the lock capability that I was talking about within parallel approvals. This capability doesn't work, so you need to create a background step with a subflow to lock it through a lock action. This is how smart approvals are leveraged by checking this checkbox. And lastly, for the approval chain, this is what I mentioned, that this is important for designing for the preview approval capabilities. Within your stage as well, you can add a step that is let me reload my page. That is a non-approval step, but actually a background step. So if I add a step and add a background step, I can call a subflow that I've created to do any action that I want. Similar to what I did over here, where I'm calling a subflow to go and get the quote record from the ID itself. So if I go to my flow, I'm going to see that I'm getting my quote record, and then I'm deciding based on the discount level, return for me the quote record itself and which level is my approval assigned to, so that I can feed it back into my main approval flow. So within the approval flow, based on that, I'm going to submit for the approvals that I have. And if I go back to my quote record, I'm going to see that I created an approvals tab. I added the 3 components that we talked about. So now that I've added 40% on my quote line or my quote, then I'm going to submit it to all 3 levels that I have. If I press on preview approval, I'll be able to see what are all the sequential approvals that I have. This is when I told you the chain name is important, because it groups them all together. So different chains are going to be in different categories as well. So you see you have the sales ops, the manager, and then the finance approval, all grouped and under the same chain. Then I've created, because it's an auto launch flow, I followed the documentation to create the button. And again, I submit the documentation with the recording as well. So once you submit for approval, as a submitter, you'll be able to put in the comments. So please consider ASAP, and then I submit. As an approver, I'm gonna get an email and be able to see my approval work item assigned to me. So as you can see, now that I'm an approver, I'll be able to see my level 1 approval. I'll be able to approve or reject and be able to give my decisions as well. Within the approval work items, I can see that there's an approval work item assigned to the sales ops group under the discount approval chain. If I go, and this is going back to what we talked about within the data model that we have. So if I go back to my work item, I'll be able to see who is this assigned to, if they make a decision, any comments that they do, when they approve, all of that stuff. I, as an approver, can reassign it as well to another user, and I can give a decision, obviously, on that. My work item is going to be tied to a submission. So if I go to my submission, every submission is going to be having multiple work items. Once these work items are going to be created, once we get to the step related to that work item. So once this is approved, I'm going to go to my manager for approval. A new work item assigned to the manager is going to be created under that submission. And we're going to see that in just a second. This submission is going to be tied to an orchestration run. And this orchestration run walks you through the exact flow that we saw in design time. This is more related to a runtime of the exact flow. So you can see that we're still in progress in level 1. Once level 1 gets approved, we're going to be in progress for level 2, and this step is going to be completed. So let's do that and then see what changes happen. So as an approver, I can either review it from here or go to my quote record and approve from here. So I'm going to say approve. Thanks. So once I refresh my page and go back to my approvers tab, I'm going to see that the sales ops record has been approved. And now we have the level 2 that is being submitted. So a new work item has been created under the existing submission. So now if I go to my submission, I'm going to see 2 work items. And if I go to my orchestration run, I'll be able to see that the level 1 has been completed, and who completed it, and how much time did they take. And then the level 2 is in progress as well. And I keep going through the list, and then becomes basically the same for the finance approval. So as a summary, the actual submission is the whole submission for the record, and all the work items or flow steps that are happening within the flow are going to be created and assigned for the different users or assigned approvers that we have. And then within that, we have the orchestration run that's also going through the flow and creating those respective work items and tying everything together. So hopefully with that, we were able to see and understand more about approvals. Thank you so much for following along. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions if you have any related to approvals or any Revenue Cloud question. Thank you so much.